I've actually had the opportunity to see in person. Now, it wasn't in New York City on Broadway. It was actually at the Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, and I saw it in October of 2019, so 5 years ago. And I walked out, and I didn't love it like I wanted to. It just didn't hit the way that I thought it would. It didn't reach the heights of some of these other musicals that I'm a big fan of. And so that was kind of just that. I saw the stage play production. I never really grew up going to see stage plays, and so I kind of just said, okay, whatever. Wicked's just not my favorite, and that's all right. I moved on from it. Now we fast forward 5 years later. Here we are in November of 2024, and there's a movie adaptation out. I've seen it, and I can confidently say that I think I might have fallen in love with Wicked now. Right off the bat, this movie establishes a sense of wonder. I was almost in awe sitting there in the theater as we pan up and reveal just the grand layout of Oz. It immersed me in this world almost immediately, and it never let up. I was just sitting there feeling like I was a fly on the wall in this story. And whenever a movie creates its own unique world, you're just bought in. I think of the Wizarding World in Harry Potter. I think of Middle-earth with Lord of the Rings. I think there's a comparable atmosphere here in Wicked. It feels like you're witnessing something special. There's just this unique nature to the movie that sucks you in, from the character design to the actual practical sets to just the language of every character and the way people carry themselves in this film. I have to give praise to both Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo for playing Galinda and Elphaba respectively. They knocked it out of the park.
I was very impressed.
I was too, because I wasn't particularly looking forward to it.
I saw the musical on Broadway, 20 plus years ago with Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel. And I didn't remember anything except Defying Gravity and the shock of realizing that the Wicked Witch of the West didn't start out mean. But other than that, I didn't recall much. One of the things I really appreciated is that, of course, there's a lot of CGI, but you can tell that a lot of grand sets were built. And I think it really does add to the epic nature of it.
The majesty.
It almost has the magic of The Wizard of Oz.
Given that we've been bombarded with Wicked press for what feels like years, I was a little skeptical of this movie. And also the fact that it's a musical, and musicals are very infamous for not doing very well. So I thought maybe this is going to be very overhyped, but oh my gosh, you guys, I had so much fun. It really felt like the entire team just cared so much about every detail. And honestly, that's so rare to see these days, I feel, especially with adaptations. As someone who hadn't seen the play, who really did not know the story, I really loved learning about all of the callbacks to The Wizard of Oz, and I had no idea the lore about the animals or the grimoire. As I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, I guess it does make sense that there's a goat professor, because in the original there's a talking lion and there's flying monkeys, which again, that was really cool to see. Oh, like that's how the monkeys got their wings, and that's how the Wicked Witch of the West gets her hats. Oftentimes when movies do callbacks, I find them to be very annoying, but actually in this movie I thought it was very tasteful. It was not overpowering, and everything had a purpose.
People that I knew working in Hollywood, they kept saying the same thing. Wicked was going to be huge. Ariana Grande was going to be a big deal come this award season. This movie was going to take over in a big way. A lot of people didn't believe that, and now with the movie about to be released, I got the chance to see it, and I can tell you, even with some of that high praise I had heard, this movie exceeded far beyond my expectations. And the reason I think this movie is catching on, and the reason I think it's finding success, is because it takes everything great about the beloved musical and is able to use a large budget to expand on that musical while keeping true to the spirit of the source material. This is really cool for me because I actually got the chance to see Wicked in San Francisco September. So I really do get to compare this movie to the Broadway sensation that I saw, and what works, how it develops, and if a lot of the ideas are justified. Even knowing the positive reactions that I was hearing from this movie, and, you know, being pretty pro Ariana Grande in general, like, I'm not going to say I was this huge fan by any means. Like, I would say I'm pretty neutral on her altogether, but I like some of her songs, and I think whenever she's on SNL, she's very comedically gifted, so I thought she was always going to do a fairly good job in this role. She far exceeded anything that I could have projected onto her. She is wonderful in Wicked, like just straight up wonderful in this movie. You believe this relationship of these two enemies turned friends. And that's the big selling point of this movie. The fact that you buy into all that really helps justify everything about this movie, because a lot of the added runtime in this movie is their friendship being explored. And when you buy more into the friendship, it makes the whole narrative focus and conceit of this movie all the much better. And when you're doing that, it makes the finale all that more impactful. But there is a lot to like about Wicked, and overall, I was surprised with how much I like this movie and how much I'm going to be able to recommend Wicked. There are certainly flaws, but ultimately in the theater, I had a great time watching it. I didn't notice the length of this movie. I thought it moves at a good pace, and I had a great time with it. And it is, I think, probably the best version of this movie that we could have gotten. And that's exciting.
I mean, it seemed only fair considering I made a pretty snarky video about the film's star and the potential box office fallout from her weird behaviour, but goofy social media meltdowns and insufferable press tours aside, I figured it was only right to separate the art from the artist here and give the movie a shot. And here's the funny thing. It's actually pretty good. I mean, there's a couple of big caveats to that for sure. If you're not a fan of musicals in general, or the Wicked stage show in particular, then I don't imagine there's much here that'll win you over. But judging it on its own merits as a piece of musical theatre, I have to admit that Wicked is a pretty impressive production. The song and dance numbers are all faithfully ported over from the stage show, with the added flamboyance and effects you'd expect from a big Hollywood movie. The world of Oz, with all its vibrant colours, wacky architecture, and outlandish technology, is brilliantly recreated on screen in a way we've never quite seen before. The cast all deliver solid and surprisingly heartfelt performances, including Ariana Grande, who I would have expected to be a weak link in something like this. In short, Wicked is a big, colourful, flamboyant, gloriously campy, and over-the-top production in the best tradition of the Hollywood musical. It's definitely not for everyone, and at well over 2.5 hours long, it feels pretty sluggish and self-indulgent at times, but credit where credit's due. It's pretty entertaining for what it is.
Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande I thought worked really well with their dynamic, their chemistry together. I thought I was just going into this thing like, okay, they're gonna be friends, it's gonna fall apart, and right, I've seen movies like that before, let's just get to the story. Well, there's more to it than that. I didn't know Gutlinda was gonna have her own character growth. I was just impressed by that. Unexpected. And Ariana Grande is surprisingly a standout. I don't know much about her. Just saying. I can't name one Ariana Grande song. I know that might sound weird, she's a pretty big star. The movie makes you root for both of them, Elphaba and Galinda. And rooting for one doesn't mean you're not rooting for the other. You're rooting for them at different times for different reasons. Now, this movie is absolutely grand in scope and scale. It feels big. It also feels like a film adaptation of a musical. Like, if I didn't know this was a musical and I watched this movie, I would definitely be like, is this adapted from a Broadway play? It just has a lot of that grand scope and the sets, the colors, the musical numbers, which the music is actually really catchy. I know to a lot of people out there, it's classic. Well, to me, it's catchy. If I had one song in my head while I was driving home, that's a win. That happened. So in the end, I surprisingly enjoyed myself in Wicked. The actors did a great job. They have good chemistry. Also, their characters were surprisingly intriguing to me. The actors are solid, good chemistry together. Oz feels grand in scope and scale. The music's catchy. And if you're not a fan of the musical, the movie does do its job in getting you invested and interested as to where this goes. They pull off the story going forward, and I've heard where the story goes going forward, and it sounds pretty awesome. This Wicked film adaptation, it could be something special.
Prior to seeing this film, my only exposure to Wicked was occasionally hearing my friends sing the songs at karaoke. I've never seen the Broadway musical. I've never listened to the soundtrack beyond those karaoke events. And I don't really know anything about the story. Of course, I've seen The Wizard of Oz, but I didn't know what this film was about. To top it off, if I were to pinpoint a genre of film that tends to be lower on my list of favorites to watch, it's musicals. I don't hate them. I'll obviously watch them. I've seen tons. It's just that I don't really get that excited about them. So in every way, I am probably the most difficult audience member to win over for Wicked. And yet, the movie did, because it is exceptionally well made. And here's just a few of the reasons why. Practical sets. I was positive, in fact, I would have bet money on the fact that this movie would be filled with just CGI. It would be a gigantic CGI mess and look incredibly fake, like a bunch of people are standing around a green room, dancing and singing, and that is not the case. Of course there's CGI in the movie, there's flying monkeys and talking goats, but in general, this movie looks remarkably in camera. There was even a gigantic train built for this movie that weighed multiple tons. The campus that the students attend in the film looks amazing as well. These are clearly sets that were either entirely built, or mostly built and then extended with CGI. So the practical sets, not something I was expecting. Limited use of very noticeable CGI, not something I was expecting. Ariana Grande, really damn good in this movie. A great comic performance. She got a ton of laughs from my audience, which was packed. Obviously, there were a lot of fans there. There were tons of people dressed up in costumes. I knew she could sing, but I hadn't really seen any of the Nickelodeon stuff she did. I kind of missed that. And she was very, very funny in the movie. She's playing a character that is inherently fairly unlikable. You look at her and you think, oh, like, you don't really care about anybody but yourself. And yet, her character evolves throughout the movie to get her to a place where you do start to understand where she's coming from. But Ariana Grande keeps you liking her throughout all of the mean stuff she does, which is really difficult to do. But the absolute lightning bolt of a performance in this movie is Cynthia Erivo. Her singing voice gave me chills down my body at multiple times. She blows the speakers out. I saw this in Dolby Atmos, which was the best way to see the film. She is a phenomenal singer, obviously, but she is incredibly endearing in the movie too, to make you care about someone who has dealt with being viewed as an outsider for her entire life. She's incredible in the dramatic scenes. I really found myself caring a lot about her, but her interplay with Ariana Grande is also fantastic. And that's what's also great about Wicked, is that it is able to kind of probe at the depths of depression and anxiety and things that bother us a lot as people, especially when you're unpopular or you're feeling lonely or you feel like you're an outcast. But it is also able to have an obscene amount of effervescent bubblegum fun that I think the film will win over even some of the more cynical people like I was going in.
Now, I am not the target demographic for Wicked. I am not a Ariana Grande fan. Anything like that. And to be honest, there have been a few things that have taken place off camera that have kind of turned me off. I'm like, but the movie looks really good. So I'm expecting it to be good, right? But being that I am not the demographic, I was only kind of willing, going in, ready to not like it, ready to like it. But probably not willing to admit it would be certain levels of good if it was, right? If you're anything like me, and I know a lot of you are, Wicked is way better than I want to admit it is. I was floored by this movie. Within the first 5 or 10 minutes of watching Wicked, I was flabbergasted by how much it felt like old school Hollywood filmmaking, with the cinematography and the sets and the number of extras and the musical numbers. So I was kind of completely taken aback by that. I knew the singing in the movie was going to be top notch, because although I'm not particularly an Ariana Grande fan, the girl can sing. Guys, I have to admit right now, Ariana Grande in this movie is a revelation. She didn't just sing her guts out. She was fabulous in the role. And I traditionally am very anti, don't put pop stars in movies. And the cinematography, every frame of this movie was a work of art. It was visually a feast to look at. It was just utterly gorgeous to look at. The interior shots, the exterior shots, the wide shots, the small shots. Hell, Peter Dinklage does the voice of a goat, and even like his little goat's house was like gorgeous. It was beautiful. So on a cinematography, I give this movie a 10 out of 10. Like it was it was a triumph of filmmaking. Then as a musical, musicals are so bloody hard to pull off well. And granted, they have the advantage of the stage play, but hey, we've all seen great stage play musicals try to be brought to a movie and have it not necessarily work out. My God, the translation of the stage, and I've never seen the stage play, but I can just tell you that it worked on screen, man. It worked on screen. It was so good. Even if I didn't think they were the greatest songs, the scenes with the songs and the choreography and the cinematography and the camera and the angles, the whole overall number they were all great. They were all great. I felt this sense of awe.
So I want to make two things very clear right off the bat. Number one, I have not seen the musical Wicked. I'm a big fan of Broadway musicals. I've seen a lot of them, and Wicked has always been on my to-see list, but I've never had a chance to see it. So my judgment of the movie is somebody who's coming in basically fresh. I've heard a couple of the songs, I knew the premise, but I don't know the musical in and out. Wicked has been doing advanced screenings for a while now, and the social media embargo, as they call it, has also been down for a while, which means that people and critics that have seen the movie early have been free to post on all of their different social platforms, and the buzz for the movie has been extremely positive. And this has been sometimes an issue recently because it seems like every movie, for some reason, if people are allowed to tweet about it or X or post or whatever you want to call it early, it seems like the buzz is always positive. You need to look no further than The Flash and the huge positive buzz that preceded that film when the movie came out. Not so much. So I have grown very skeptical of early social media buzz. However, in this case, I'm happy to report that I think that early buzz was pretty accurate, or at least I agreed with it, because Wicked is a fantastically realized, well-acted, visually stunning movie that's not only one of my favorite recent movie musicals, it's also one of my favorite movies so far this year. Of course, a lot of Wicked also depends on the two leads. I don't want to say concerned, but curious when I heard that Ariana Grande was cast as Glinda because I knew that she could sing and that she was a popular person, but I'll openly admit that my unfamiliarity with her led me to underestimate her acting. Glinda is largely a comedy role, and if you don't have natural comic ability or comic timing, then it's not going to work. Ariana Grande has both of those, and those are things that you just kind of have. It's really hard to teach you those things. And yet she's also able to pull off the movie's dramatic moments, which is equally as important in getting you to invest in the story. Cynthia Erivo is an actress that I was more familiar with. I've enjoyed a lot of her previous performances, and she is equally as good as Elphaba.
Starring Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, I went into this film with no knowledge of the musical or any of the Wizard of Oz lore. To be honest though, none of the trailers really impressed me. I've always been open to musicals because a lot have impacted me greatly, but overall this just looked like another Hollywood cash grab. Now that I've seen the film, though it didn't blow me away, I was pleasantly surprised, and honestly I'm pretty excited for part 2. Our two lead performances, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande as Elphaba and Glinda respectively, are absolutely brilliant. Now, I think they are truly what makes this film work. If it wasn't these two actresses, I don't know if this would have worked at all. Starting with Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba, I don't really know much about the character of Elphaba other than what this film gave us on a thematic level, which I'll touch a little bit more on later, but Cynthia absolutely embodies this role. I mean, both of the lead actresses disappear within these characters. It was actually really exhilarating to watch as the film evolved.
More recently, the Wicked Witch over there said some things on social media that and the press was just, there was so much marketing, repetitive stuff. I just was like, oh man, they're nervous. This isn't very good. I was wrong. This movie is really well done. Very well done. I have to say, all my worries about it being a part 1 of part 2, pretty unfounded. And I gotta say, I had fun. I enjoyed it. And the star of the movie is Ariana Grande. She absolutely steals the movie. She's fantastic as Galinda. The music is really well done. My favorites are Popular, Defying Gravity are the two, big songs that are in this, along with a lot of the other ones from the show. And kudos to John Cho for figuring out how to work this. I was worried. Based on the talent. I was worried on part 1. I was worried on, this is going to be one of those cheesy musicals. But no, overall, I was pretty impressed. Really enjoyed. I had fun. It's emotional. It's rousing is the word I would use. You're rooting for the story. And my God, that music, when it hits at the end and they defying of gravity, he pulled it off. So well done to everybody involved.
For me, being a straight, white, middle-aged man who's clearly the target demo for this film, I have to say I went into this with very low expectations. In fact, I almost kind of went in kicking and screaming, but my 15-year-old daughter really wanted to check it out. She was very pumped. But a fun quality about me is I have the ability to let a movie speak for itself. Sure, I might not be excited going in, but I want to be changed. I want to be wowed by what I'm watching, and I have to say this about Wicked. It did wow me. It did excite me. I was engaged, and I'm excited for part 2. As I stated earlier, I went into this not really feeling the vibe of the whole thing. I'm not against musicals. I love La La Land. Think it's a fantastic film. I'm even a sucker for Grease. You throw that on, I'm dancing along with it. It's Grease Lightning! But a Wizard of Oz spin-off based on a book, based on a Broadway musical, I think it's pulling from each. I don't know, that was a tough sell. But I ended up purchasing, and I am a satisfied customer. My daughter absolutely floored by it as well. I was actually interested in this storyline and even some of the subplots and how they're going to play out in the future.